Okay, Ben Shapiro on election night. Let's have a listen.
And I got to tell you, the turning point of this election is when Donald Trump and I stood by the grave of, and there's a picture of me and Donald Trump making prayers, at the grave of Rabbi Menachem Mendel Schneerson. That's the moment when this election was decided.
Of course.
Through pure Zionistic laser power. That is when this election turned. Boom. Check out the polls. October 7th, 2024.
I will curse those, right, who curse you?
Yeah. Correct. There you go. God coming through once again. I had a going theory that I told some friends before this, that God definitely wants Donald Trump to win. I've been saying this for a while, that God clearly wants Donald Trump to win. There's only one reason: God turns Trump's head right at the last minute, and the bullet misses him by this much.
Okay, so there are really two different things in that clip, right? The first thing that Ben talks about is attributing, let's say, the victory of Donald Trump in the election to his visit to pray at the graveside of the Lubavitcher Rebbe. I mean, hey, I don't know. He says, look at the polls. I haven't looked at the data. I certainly am a big believer in the power of prayer. Certainly a big believer in the power of prayer in holy places and the graves of holy people, etc. So, hey, I don't know. Have a look. Maybe go back and track the polls like he says, and we'll see. We'll see whether that was the starting point of a movement. The second thing that he talks about is that he says that there's only... let's take the second thing and break it down into two parts. So he says that clearly God wanted Trump to be elected. Why? Because why else would Trump have, in that event when there was a attempt to assassinate Donald Trump, and you see that it seems like at literally the right split second, he turned his head so that a bullet that would have perhaps gone straight through his temple, which would have resulted in things ending very differently. He turned his head just at the right instant, at the right millisecond, so that the bullet whizzed by his head instead and just nicked his ear. The truth is, in general, personally, I'm not a huge fan of this whole approach that some people have of attributing things to God and explaining what the reason is, and explaining, well, this happened and the reason is because God wanted that, etc. I don't know. I'm not a huge fan. I don't claim to understand God's interests or desires or ways. Certainly not. I mean, look, there are a lot of things that we could spend the rest of our lives trying to figure out, and we'd never be able to explain why God did things the way that he did. So clearly there's a big part of the picture, most of the picture, that, God's calculations and metrics and decision-making algorithm is way beyond, the reach and the grasp of the human mind. So personally, in general, I'm not a big fan of the whole, oh, God did this because of that, because he wanted this, etc. But honestly, it's mostly in the name of fun, and you can it's mostly seems like it's in jest and for the sake of a good laugh. So it's all good. The one thing that I would say that I do strongly agree with is, at the end of the day, the evidence is clear that God did want Trump to win. And there's one way that we know that, and that's that Trump what? I mean, everything that happens, nothing that can happen against God's will, against God's plan. Obviously, when we get into the whole conversation about free choice, then things get extremely complex, and we'll leave that for another time. But yeah, I mean, the fact that Trump won is evidence of the fact that, yeah, God clearly did want Trump to win. And so here we are.